you pretty much talk about him every show, and I want you to talk about him here now. But what I want to know is, as far as Julian Assange is concerned. Now, I asked Fee her Marvel origin story last week, so I was curious, what led you down that road to that made you such an advocate for not just the freedom of Julian Assange, but freedom of press in general?
Well, I've always kind of been pretty big into free press, free speech. It's always been something that I've seen as extremely important. Especially if you intend to fight for anything else, you definitely need those two things in order to do that effectively. But as far as being super involved, I wasn't really super involved until Julian Assange was pulled out of the Ecuadorian embassy. I was a casual supporter. I would donate. I bought merch. I read all of the releases. I considered myself to be like an advocate for and a supporter of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. But really, when he was essentially kidnapped from the Ecuadorian embassy, that kind of was a smack in the face, I think, for me. And it made me realize how serious it was. And I say this all the time. That's I hate myself for it now for not having been more involved before then. But that really, I think, set something off in me. And I realized that because I think before it was always like, oh, they're going to have to let him out eventually. And it sucked that he was being held arbitrarily in the Ecuadorian embassy. But I was like, eventually this will all work itself. And then no, then they arrested him. And so that really kind of set something off. And I realized how critical this was. And that's when I kind of went hyperdrive. I have an obsessive personality anyways. And so once I get focused on something, it's like hyper focus.
Right. Well, I mean, and Julian Assange and free press is something very important to get hyper-focused on, particularly with events that have been happening this year with censorship of not just independent media, but also just regular people like Ron Paul, had his channel taken
and it's
down
across
today.
the board. It's not just the left, it's not just the right, it's not just the Alex Joneses, the universally despised. It's everybody. They're taking down 21 foreign language news websites in one day, and Richard Medhurst is constantly attacked, Nico's constantly attacked, Convo Couch is still demonetized on YouTube. There's a ton of people today. Ron Placone got locked out of his channel. I think Steve got locked out of his channel again. This happens all the time, and it's going to continue to happen. And it's really scary because we're now to the point. They just said today that YouTube's going to start taking down anything that they deem to be misinformation about COVID or vaccines. That's fucking scary, y'all. Because who gets to decide what's misinformation? Because even the information we had 6 months ago from official sources would now be seen as misinformation. So it's this crazy. It's getting so bad, and I have a difficult time because I feel bad that I can't find the right words to get people to recognize how serious this is, because this is really serious. This, to me, the Assange case, what's happening to Assange, and just the censorship in general is kind of, we're at a turning point. You know what I mean? We're going to go one of two different ways. And one way leads directly into fascism. We already kind of live in fascism now. But if they are able to have that sort of control over information and journalism, we are so screwed. You know what I mean? It's bad.
Oh, yeah. I came up about 30 years ago. I was in media down south. I started out as a production assistant, and then throughout the years I made my way up to an executive producer. So as far as news content on the local level was concerned, it's very important. I guess it's kind of a different beast because it's local as compared to national, but still it's kind of a microcosm of what you're dealing with on the national and world scale. Because now what I'm seeing, a lot of these local TV stations are getting bought up by Clear Channel, or I think they're called something else now, but they used to be called Clear Channel. Thanks to the Telecommunications Act of '96, where now a handful of these companies can buy not just giant media companies, but also like local television stations too. And there was a video I saw, and it showed like it was cutting to about like 50 different news stations.
The montage that was Sinclair, Sinclair Broadcasting.
That was Sinclair, yeah. It was like the same story, the same lead in. Now I have to say, from a local person, insider, some of that's probably just lazy. They just said, you know, they get those scripts in and they're like, all right, good enough. We're going to put that on there. But still, that's still lazy journalism, even if it's for, if you're doing something like a kicker, like a flower show, or like, everybody came out today for the big family fair at so-and-so, you could do that whatever you want. But when you're talking about important news, you shouldn't just ham-fist it like that. You should not be a stenographer. And I think that's all
that's really indicative of the state of journalism, though, because if you think about it, how many times have we seen the AP report something and then all of the other outlets just regurgitate whatever they said? And that happens all the time. They just reprint or regurgitate, something that somebody else, there was one article that CNN said, they just basically just copy pasted somebody else's reporting. And that happens all the time. And yes, it is a little bit of laziness, but it's also the fact that, our media is completely corporate controlled. I mean, years ago, they said 90% of the media was controlled by 5 or 6 corporations. I'm sure it's worse than that now. There's been more mergers. And so we're dangerously close to having complete 100% corporate control of all of our information, all of our media sources. That's really scary because these people clearly, obviously they have an agenda. And so, to have a situation where we have no idea what's happening. It takes a lot of effort to find truth in this world. And most people just don't have the time. So we're living amongst people who are completely clueless about what's happening in the world around them. And that's not good.